Winning is awesome, and losing sucks. It's that simple. That's why today I'm going to give you 5 easy tips that are going to make you a damn winner more times than not. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today. We're going to be talking about 5 tips that are going to make you better at fantasy football. Now, I've had another video similar to this earlier in the week. Why back-to-back videos on some tips to get better? Well, I'm still out of the country. The family's in El Salvador on a missions trip, and I did not want to put together some videos on some players, have some information change while I'm gone, and then have the video make no sense. But there's nothing wrong with throwing even more tips out there so all the members of Headliner Nation can absolutely kill it in 2024. Now, if you still find yourself with more questions, no worries, there's options for you. You can always hit the join button here right underneath the video. We have multiple tiers, multiple price points, multiple perks, but the biggest one is access to our Discord. We have put together a Discord channel that is full of like-minded people that want to enjoy the game of fantasy football. This is a toxic-free zone. There are no asshats in our Discord. And when it comes to this industry here as of late, that is a rarity to find. So if you're looking for a little bit more help and you want to be a part of a community that actually welcomes you and wants to play the game alongside you, that's where you need to hit the join button here right underneath the video and become an official member of Headliner Nation. Now, if you're just finding us, hit the subscribe button. See what we got going on here over the next few weeks. I have a feeling you're going to want to join anyway. But let's go ahead and dive into the tips here today. Here are 5 tips that are going to make you better at fantasy football. And the first tip to make you a better fantasy football player is do not panic early on in the season. Be sure to write this one down in your notes, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you gotta do. Because we see it every single year. I've done this channel for almost 8 years, and every single season, it never fails. The first few weeks of the season, there's going to be a few slow starting studs. People panic and want to trade them away. That is a huge mistake in fantasy football because you're trading away a stud player at a discounted price because you're just over it to a team that has the luxury of maybe waiting a week or two for them to pick it back up. But the problem with that is by the end of the season, their team is absolutely loaded and it makes them hard to beat. I will never just cut bait on a player until at least 4 weeks into the season. But it's not just that one player. It also depends, how is my team performing? If I'm 4 weeks into the season and I have a slow starting stud, but my team is still 3-1, I'm not trading that guy away just yet. Now, if you enter the 4th week of the season and your team is 0-4, it's time to start making moves. You just got to remember, it's a super long season. There's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some players that start off a little slow. There are a lot of stud players nowadays that don't really partake in preseason games. So really, in reality, the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season is the preseason for some of these guys. Now, I hate that. I wish it wasn't that way, but they also don't want these studs getting hurt in the preseason like we saw the last couple of years. So if they start a little bit slow, just remember, don't panic early on. All right, point number 2 to make you a better fantasy football player: don't be so quick to just make trades all the time. In a lot of leagues that I've been in as well, people just send out trade offers like crazy. If you really dislike the team that you have so much, why did you draft them in the first place? And I'll be honest, most of the leagues that I've been in for over 25 years, I'm not going to make more than 1 or 2 trades a season. Some of y'all out there sending out trade offers 1 or 2 times a week. Now, I understand that making trades is super fun when it comes to fantasy football. But the last thing you want to do is go out and make a trade that does not help your team. Sure, it may be a little bit exciting going back and forth and figuring out what that trade may be, but in the long run, does it actually help you? Sure, it gave you something to do for an hour or 2 while you were bored at work, but it doesn't help your chances at winning a title. Draft the players you want on your team. Make a couple moves throughout the season. Remember, you can't sit back and just worry about what's going to happen in the fantasy playoffs if you don't even make it to the fantasy playoffs. So I'm not opposed into improving your team through the trade process, but you don't have to be going out there and making 15 trades a year in order for that to happen. All right, tip number 3 to become a better fantasy football player: do not blow your FAAB budget or your waiver priority early on in the season. You should just be coming out of your draft. Hopefully you have a team full of healthy players. The last thing you want to do is give up on drafted players early on in the season to just pick up some rando on the waiver wire because he had one good game. You have to remember, there's going to come a time during the season where you're going to need a player off the waiver wire. You're going to have some money available to go after a guy that's going to command a large bid in order to land him. If you're out there blowing your wad in week 1 and week 2, you're not going to have the availability in weeks 8 or 9 when you really need the player. Now, if you're out there watching and you don't know what FAAB budget means, that's the amount of money that you start the season with that you're allowed to bid on players through the waiver process throughout the year. Once that money is gone, though, you got to wait for whoever clears waivers. Personally, if it's me, I want to have at least 60% of my budget left over or one of the top waiver priorities come mid-season. I need to set myself up for an end-of-the-year run, and if that means I need somebody off waivers at some point, I want to be sure I have that opportunity. Sure, it's just play money. You don't see it coming out of your own pocket, so you just spend it early. But if you want to become better at fantasy football, you need to keep some of that money in your account. I've actually heard of leagues out there that their FAAB budget is actually real money. And honestly, I love that idea. If that's something you're able to do in your league, it makes it really interesting. All that money ends up going into the pot. It makes the jackpot. It makes the prize bigger for whoever walks away with the trophy. But even if you don't play that way, just remember, do not blow your FAAB budget or a high waiver priority early on in the season if it's a player you do not need at that time. Tip number 4 to becoming a better fantasy football player, don't just set your lineup based off site projections. And I hear this all the time. I actually see it. People will submit screenshots all the time of their team and how they have their current lineup set. And the way they've set it is just so their projected point total is the highest. Now, I don't know if you've really noticed or not, but those projections are never right. And in my opinion, they give you nothing but a false sense of security. If I set my lineup on a Wednesday and it says I have a 33% chance of winning, that doesn't bother me. And I say that because every single week, there are players that outperform whatever their projection may be listed at. Try to make your roster decisions and not even look at those numbers. Look at the players themselves. What have they done here as of late? What about the matchup they're currently going into? Is it a good matchup? Is it a bad matchup? What about the weather in that matchup? Those are all things that matter way more than whatever that little projection number says. We provide you with all the information needed on a weekly basis, on a matchup basis, to where you understand what the matchup can look like for that player. Take that information, look at your overall roster, make the best decisions based off of actual information, not some AI-generated number that probably thinks that Eddie Lacy is still the running back of the Green Bay Packers. I can remember multiple games last year where a quarterback was projected for 20 plus fantasy points, but the weather was going to be absolutely atrocious. I'm sorry, but I don't want to trust a quarterback in a blizzard or a torrential downpour, no matter what that little projection number says. So analyze each player. Look at their situation for that game. Ignore the projections and then make the best possible decisions with the players you have available. And then lastly, tip number 5, trust your gut. You got to remember, at the end of the day, this is your fantasy football team. I'm not the one controlling your fantasy football team. Other articles and channels and information you're getting, they're not running your fantasy football team. You are. And if you have a gut feeling about a player, don't ignore it. And I'll tell you exactly the reason why. Because if you ignore a gut feeling you have about a player, and then you end up being right, but you listen to somebody else, you're going to be so pissed off that you didn't trust yourself, it's going to make this game not fun at times. You shouldn't be consuming fantasy football content to be told what to do by anyone. Honestly, I would much rather just supply you the information that you need to make those better decisions. I don't want to sit here and tell anyone what they should be doing with their fantasy football lineups. One of the best feelings out there is starting a player that maybe wasn't projected very highly, but they absolutely go off. They lead you to a victory that week, and you get to go out there and tell all your league mates about the great decision that you made that week. So I will always tell people, no matter what, always trust your gut. So hopefully you can take these 5 tips in today's show and really become a better overall fantasy player. It's a great feeling to go out there and build something, take pride in it, and then walk away with a trophy at the end. Now, if you enjoy content like this, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be here all year long, each and every year, to make sure you have that information you need to be successful. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running